The anime begins by showing a Grim Reaper, or better known as a Shinigami, named Ryuk, who looks bored with his life in the sky world. Ryuk then thought of an idea to drop a curse book called Death Note to find out how humans react after finding the book. The Death Note itself is a book that allows the owner of the book to have the ability to kill other people by simply writing the name of their target in the book. The book owner can explain in detail the cause of death of their target, but if the cause of death is not written, the target will automatically die of a heart attack. Ryuk's Death Note ends up being found by a very genius high school boy named Light Yagami in the schoolyard. Although Light looks skeptical of the power possessed by the book, he still brings the book with him out of curiosity. At first, Light still doesn't believe that a book with Death Note can kill someone just like that. But because he began to be curious about the truth behind the book, he wrote down the name of a criminal he saw on television. 40 seconds after Light wrote the name in the book, the criminal suddenly died of a heart attack. Light then looks surprised to see what happened and starts to think that the Death Note book really works. However, he still couldn't believe what he just saw, so he tried to write down someone's name a second time. Light tries to come out and writes down the names of some thugs who are trying to rape a woman. After he witnessed the death of the thugs, he finally believed that the Death Note book was real. 5 days after Ryuk dropped the Death Note into the human world, Ryuk decided to go down and see the state of the humans who had found the book. Upon arriving at Light's house, he immediately reveals his form in front of Light and introduces himself as the Shinigami who has the book. After explaining some of the Death Note's rules to Light, Ryuk then explains that he will always accompany Light as long as Light still has the book. Among all the warnings that Ryuk gave, there is one important thing that he emphasized, that all Death Note users will not go to hell or heaven but to another place in the void. But Light does not care about it at all and intends to become a new god for himself and other humans. Light will judge the bad people in this world and let the good people leave so he can create a better world order. Hearing Light's idealism, Ryuk becomes more and more interested in human characters who are very difficult to predict. After that, Light begins to carry out various murders against the criminals by writing their names on the Death Note. He continued to do so until the media began highlighting the increasing number of criminal deaths that have occurred in recent weeks. Not only that, society began to split into two, where some supported Light's efforts to eradicate the criminals in this world, while others felt that what Light was doing was nothing more than murder. Although no one knows that Light is the mastermind behind it all, the public has begun to give the mysterious killer the nickname Kira. The supporters of Kira even started to create a website that contains all the information about the big-time criminals in Japan. At the same time, the police began investigating the death cases of several criminals who died from the same cause of death, namely a heart attack. They still couldn't understand how someone could kill so many people in a very short time and cause death with the same cause. In confusion experienced by the police agency, a male detective named L appears and offers a plan to prove that Kira really did the murder. In this plan, L will broadcast a broadcast on television by bringing up an inmate with the pseudonym Lindell Taylor so that when Light tries to kill Taylor, his efforts will not succeed. With that incident, L finally learns that Kira can only kill his target if he knows the target's real name. L also knows that Kira is currently living in Japan because all of Kira's victims are criminals who are broadcast on Japanese television. After hearing L's declaration of war, Light feels increasingly challenged and wants to know how far L can reveal his secret. This is because L can find out various information related to Kira so accurately that Light realizes that L is not an ordinary detective. Even just relying on the information L gathered from the time of death of each of Kira's victims, he could immediately guess that Kira was a student. L can also read the motives or ideals of Kira's massacre, where he knows that Kira wants to become a new god in the human world. However, even though L knew that all of the victims Kira killed were criminals, he still thought that what Kira did was nothing more than murder. L thinks that Kira is only justifying all of his killings by choosing criminals as his targets. At this point, L appears to be superior to Light because he has learned important information regarding Kira's true identity. However, Light is actually one step ahead of L because he can find out the investigation files carried out by L and the police from his father's computer. Light's father, Soichiro Yagami, is the main leader of the Central Police, so Soichiro will receive all reports from the investigation files owned by the police. After Light realizes that the police are starting to suspect Kira is a student, he tries to kill his target during school hours to disprove the suspicion. Unfortunately, instead of thinking that Kira is not a student, L suspects that the police's data has been leaked and he is increasingly convinced that Kira is a student. That means Light's attempt to disguise his identity as a student has failed, so he has to think of other ways to solve the problem. The police are starting to get scared because Light already knows internal information from the police, so some of them choose to withdraw from the case. When the police panicked, L tried to trace some information from all the police officers involved in the Kira case investigation with the help of the FBI. Among the many police officers involved in the case, Soichiro Yagami is also on the list of police officers that L is investigating. The next night, Light realizes that he is being followed by an FBI agent sent by L, so he intends to get rid of the agent. However, to carry out the plan, he must first find out the real name of the FBI agent. Ryuk tries to offer the Eye of Death ability that lets Light know the real names of everyone he sees. However, Light immediately refuses the offer after learning that he has to trade half of his lifespan to get the ability. Moreover, Light has found a way to determine which agent's real name is to carry out the plan. He has to test one of the rules from the Death Notebook. So far, Light only writes the name of each target without writing in detail about the cause of death of the target, so this time he will try to give more details about the target's death so that their death looks like an ordinary accident. Before killing the FBI agents who followed him, Light killed several criminals in different ways to prove whether it really worked. After confirming that the method worked, he began executing his plan to lure the FBI member out. That day, Light deliberately invited his girlfriend to go on a date to a place by taking a bus. But in the middle of the trip, suddenly a robber appeared who boarded the bus and threatened all bus passengers with a gun. The FBI agent tries to get Light to fight the robber so they can save the other passengers. However, because Light does not trust the FBI agent immediately shows his FBI ID card to him so that he trusts him. At that moment, Light knows the real name of the FBI agent and immediately writes the name of the robber into the death note he has brought. Not long after, the robber suddenly saw a terrible appearance from Ryuk because he accidentally touched the death note that Light threw. As a result, the robber forced the bus driver to stop the bus so he could escape. But when the robber got off the bus, a car traveling at a very high speed suddenly appeared and hit the robber to death. It turns out that everything that happened on the bus was planned by Light so that he could find out the real name of the FBI agent. That night, when the FBI agent named Ray Penberg arrived at the house, he told his wife about the accident that he had seen earlier, and for some reason, his wife immediately suspected that the incident was caused by Kira. A week after the incident, Light began carrying out his plan to kill Ray and 12 other FBI members. He secretly follows Ray at a train station and threatens him to write the names of 12 other FBI agents on a piece of paper. Unbeknownst to Ray, the paper he used to write the names was Death Note paper, and at that time, Ray also didn't know anything about Death Notes, so he wrote down all the names without suspicion. 40 seconds after Ray wrote all the names on the paper, Ray and 12 other FBI agents died of heart attacks. As a result of this incident, the FBI leadership immediately contacted L and resigned from the Kira investigation case. The same thing was done by some members of the Japanese police because they did not want to experience a sudden death like what happened to the FBI agents. After a massive resignation, only 5 members of the police force, including Light's father, are willing to help L investigate Kira's case. A few days later, L received news that Ray Penberg's wife, Naomi Masora, had just died due to ending her own life. L then suspects that the deaths of Naomi and Ray are related to Kira, so he will focus his investigation on people who Ray has met before. At this moment, one of the people L suspects is Light Yagami because Ray was previously assigned to investigate his activities. L then asks Soichiro for help to install some surveillance cameras in Light's room secretly. Even though Soichiro initially objected to doing that, in the end, he complied with L's request because he was sure his son was not Kira. However, the genius Light can easily notice the presence of a surveillance camera in his room, so he asks Ryuk for help to find out the location of the surveillance camera. After knowing the location of the surveillance camera, Light did not immediately remove the camera so that L and the others would not feel suspicious. Light pretends not to be aware of the surveillance camera and acts as usual, but he secretly kills the criminals by listening to the sound of the mini television he hides in the snack package. After watching Light for several days, L's team found nothing suspicious about his activities, so L had no choice but to remove the surveillance camera from his room. However, because L still suspects Light of being Kira, he secretly follows Light's activities and enrolls at the same university as Light. At the time of the announcement of passing the exam, L managed to get a perfect test score like Light, and on that occasion, he began to make friends with Light. Even L also invites Light to join the investigation team with him with the aim that he can get to know him more closely. A few days later, the Japanese public was shocked by the appearance of Kira, who delivered a warning on television broadcasts. But this time, L realized that the Kira who appeared recently was a different person from the first Kira. He then asks Light to pretend to be the first Kira so they can catch the second Kira. Light then had no other choice but to agree to it, but after finding the second Kira, Light took the initiative to contact the second Kira secretly without L's knowledge. After meeting a girl named Misa Amane with her Shinigami named Ren, Light and Misa plan to get rid of L. But because Light doesn't know L's real name yet, Light asks Misa to find out L's name using her Death Eye. It turns out that previously Misa had made a Death Eye transaction with Ren, although to get that ability, she had to sacrifice half of her life. The next day, Light begins carrying out his plan by bringing L with Misa so that she can find his real name. But it turns out that the plan failed because L used the opportunity to arrest Masa and interrogate her. When L and his team are interrogating Masa, Ren advises Masa to release her possession of the Death Note so that she can forget all about the Death Note and Shinigami. Masa decides to give up ownership of the Death Note so that L can't get any clues. After all of Masa's memories of Death Note and Ren disappear, Masa's personality changes drastically, making L even more disoriented about who Kira really is. Shortly after, Light confesses to L that he has been controlled by Kira and volunteers to be held in prison. Light deliberately did that to get rid of L's suspicions of him because, on that day, Light would release his ownership of the Death Note to someone else. When Light and Masa are arrested, Ren and Ryuk will go to find the new owner of the Death Note so that the murder of criminals continues, so that Light and Masa can prove that they are not Kira. After L feels sure that Masa and Light are not the Kira he's been looking for all this time, he decides to release them both and put them under house arrest. Now, L will focus on finding out who is behind the recent murders of several company leaders. This is because the pattern of murder that occurs to the victims is the same as the criminals who were previously the targets of the first Kira. It turns out that the perpetrator behind the murder of several company leaders is a young executive named Higuchi who is currently the third Kira. Unlike Light and Masa, Higuchi prefers to use the Death Note to kill a business rival from his company called Yotsuba. However, because Higuchi is too reckless, L could easily track down the company behind all these murders and start carrying out a plan to capture the third Kira. L asks Masa, who is a model, to apply for a job as an advertisement star at the Yotsuba company to investigate which member of the Yotsuba board plays Kira. However, on the day of the interview, Ren suddenly appears and restores Masa's memory using a torn Death Note. After remembering everything about the Death Note and Shinigami, Masa can finally see Ren's form and learns that the owner of Ren's Death Note is Higuchi. Masa then tries to approach Higuchi and date him so she can get a confession from him. After getting a voice recording of Higuchi's confession, Masa then tells L and his team about Higuchi. After knowing this, L concludes that it is very likely that the ability of a Kira can be transferred to someone else because he still believes that Light is the first Kira. To find out all about Kira's powers, L and his team begin to devise a plan to capture Higuchi. He then deliberately makes a fake broadcast that reveals Kira's identity to the media so that he can lure Higuchi to the TV station. When Higuchi arrived at the TV station, L and his team took the opportunity to arrest him. After successfully capturing Higuchi, L immediately interrogates him about how he got his powers and how he killed someone. After a lengthy interrogation, L finally finds out all about the Death Note, the power of the Death Note and the Shinigami. When L and his team touched Higuchi's Death Note, they began to see the appearance of Shinigami Ren. The same thing happened to Light. Even he could see Ren and remember everything about Death Note and Ryuk. After Light recalls everything about the Death Note, he kills Higuchi with the Death Note that he keeps on his watch so that Higuchi doesn't tell L any other clues. Not only that, but Light also secretly writes false rules on the part in the back of the Death Notebook to outwit L. In the fake rule, he writes that any Kira who doesn't kill within 13 days, they will die of a heart attack. He hopes this way can make L and his investigation team stop suspecting him and Masa. Light then orders Masa to remember L's name again so they can both kill L immediately. Masa again makes a Death Eye transaction with Ryuk and exchanges half of her age. However, because Masa had previously made a Death Eye transaction with Ren, now she has not much age anymore. When Masa returns to L's headquarters to see his real name, Ren immediately realizes that Masa's lifespan is not much anymore. This forced Ren to do something unusual where she chose to kill L using her Death Note because she thought that all this chaos was caused by L. Even though Ren was only a Shinigami, she already loved Masa more than anything and she was willing to do anything to protect her. In the end, Ren also had to perish because she had violated the rules by saving human lives, which was against the duty of a Shinigami. After L died, Light continued his mission as Akira and began to carry out massive killings of all criminals in Japan. Moreover, he is now a member of the Japanese police, so he is more flexible in finding various information and identities of hundreds of criminals. On the other hand, two teenage boys named Nier and Mello have just heard the news about L's death. They both intend to investigate the cause of L's death because L is their only relative while in the orphanage. Nier and Mello also know much about the Death Note and Kira because L had previously told them about it. They believe that L's death is related to Kira and the Death Note, so they devise a plan to steal the Death Note from the hands of the Japanese police. After learning that Light is one of the Kiras investigated by L, they decide to kidnap Light's younger sister, Sayu, so that he will hand over the Death Note. Light then has no other choice but to hand Ryuk's Death Note to Mello and Nier to save Sayu. When Mello touched the Death Note, they looked surprised because the Shinigami they saw was not Shinigami Ryuk but another Shinigami named Sido. It turns out that the Death Notebook that was thrown away by Ryuk in the human world is not his Death Note but Sido's Death Note. Meanwhile, Ryuk's Death Notebook is still unknown. Light and the Japanese police team intend to reclaim Sido's Death Note, which is in Mello's hands. Therefore, Soichiro decides to make a death-eye deal with Ryuk so they can find out Melo's real name and kill him. Unfortunately, even though Light's team managed to attack Melo's team, Light's father was killed by Melo's men before he could tell Melo's real name. Although Melo managed to escape the attack, Sito had already stolen his own death note and took the book with him to the Shinigami world. On the other hand, Melo goes to meet Nier and tells him that Light is Kira, so it is most likely that the culprit of L's murder is Light. After knowing this, Nier immediately contacted Light and conveyed a declaration of war to him because he already knew that Light was the first Kira. After receiving the threat, Light still has to deal with two Japanese police officers named Mogi and Aizawa, who begin to suspect him as the first Kira. To overcome Mogi and Aizawa's suspicions, Light decides to hand over his possession of the Death Note to a young man named Mikami and asks him to broadcast the murder scene live on television. However, unlike in the previous incident, Light did not experience any amnesia loss because he still kept Ren's Death Note. In the end, Mogi and Aizawa's suspicions were overcome because, at the time of the murder, Light was under their control. After solving the problem, Light begins to plan with Mikami to capture Nier and Melo with the help of his ex-girlfriend, Kiyomi Takada. Unfortunately, Nier is already one step ahead of Light, where he has secretly exchanged Mikami's Death Note for a fake Death Note, so that when Kiyomi wants to kill Nier using Death Note paper, he will not be affected at all. When Nier meets Light in person, he then manages to prove that Light is Kira by showing the Death Note paper written by Mikami. Nier learns that a Kira cannot kill another Kira because they cannot find the real name of the person who already has the Death Note. At that moment, Ryuk realizes that Light has been defeated by Nier, so he decides to kill him with his own hands. In the end, Light's idealism to become a god in the human world failed to be achieved, and his life ended very sad because he was betrayed by his own Shinigami. The moral that can be learned from this anime is that no matter how bad people we know, we have no right to take their lives.